When a relationship gets bad, it sure does seem to be really, really confusing. I want to tell a story that happened to my wife and I when we were kayaking one day. And I'm going to relate it to what happens in our marriages. So, how did we start? When we started on this kayak journey, it looked something like this. Two happy people in a little kayak. We started with connection. We're in the same kayak, we're connected together, feeling good, we're excited about what this is going to look like. And we have a lot of belief. And that's how we start this journey. So, but then what happened? Well, what happened is we got to this place on our journey where we had a decision to make. There was this little, I guess, what do you call it, an island? I don't know if you call it an island, but in the middle of this river, we had a decision. We had to go left or right. We ended up going left. When we went this direction, we found that the rapids got pretty strong right here. The rapids got really, really strong. This was pretty safe, smooth passage. But over here, the rapids were so strong, and there was a sharp turn that there were other people that were kind of shipwrecked right here, or kayak wrecked, or raft wrecked. And so all we could do is kind of vacate the kayak and end up down in this mess with other people. And the water here was deep. And so both of us are in bad spots here. Now, at one point, I ended up underwater and in a dangerous situation. And when I tried to come up, I was under a raft. And I tried to come up again, I was under a kayak. And I ended up, over here there was a downed tree. And I ended up, fortunately, coming up in the tree and making it through the limbs, and I was okay. But I found myself just hanging on to these limbs over here. It's a bad picture, but you get the idea. I'm hanging on to these limbs. And it was a pretty scary situation. But I'm holding on to this down tree and its limbs and just collecting my breath and just, I'm just feeling my body. Okay, I think I survived. I am alive. I am okay. Now, my wife was over here in the middle of this current somewhere. There was a log that was not quite, it was a little below the surface of the water. And she's in the kayak kind of balancing on top of this log. So she's not feeling so great about life. If you could imagine, there's just this log that's barely underwater, and the rapids are strong, and she's just like balanced on it, on this log. Is she going to tip over? What's going to happen? So it was kind of scary. Honestly, it was very scary. But what happened was fears were exposed. Insecurities were exposed. I'd also say this, though. Life happened. When things like this happen in life, human instinct is to think, who did this? Whose fault is this? Honestly, it was kind of just life. We were venturing on this journey. We had a decision to make. We chose to go left. We didn't know it was going to turn into this big mess. But what's important to note is our responses exposed our fears, exposed our insecurities that were already there. We didn't find new fears and find new insecurities. The fears and insecurities were already in us before this happened. Frankly, those fears and insecurities probably were in us before we even started this journey, meaning these fears and insecurities were in us before we ever got married. So what was the result? So the result is I'm over here. I'm not in a kayak anymore. I'm just holding on to this dead tree, glad to be safe. Although I'm not on my journey, I am safe. And my wife is in this kayak, just balancing herself on this log, trying to protect herself, even though she's in a really bad situation. So the result is there's distance between us. We're no longer in this kayak. There's distance. There's also great insecurity, and there's great fear. Now let's talk about insecurity. Well, first of all, talk about distance. Distance means we have lost our connection. Similar to, let's say, a Wi-Fi signal in your home. When the Wi-Fi goes down, nothing in the home works in terms of your electronics and how you access things. So when the connection is gone, a lot of things go with it. Secondly, let's talk about insecurity. Insecurity causes prideful responses. For instance, pride will get very concerned with, how did this thing happen? How did this happen to me specifically? It's almost like a shock. Like, how could this happen to me? Well, honestly, our shock at something going wrong in our life or in our relationship, quite frankly, is a prideful thing. Because you know who this kind of stuff happens to? People that are alive. It happens to all humans. When I am shocked at what happens, honestly, that's our pride. Now, don't get me wrong. Of course, there's a lot of emotion and feelings that happen when you feel like you're going underwater. But when it's said and done, and you survive the journey, and I'm over here on the bank, and my wife is over here balancing on this log, if our response is shock, like, how could this happen to me? Honestly, it's pride. So another thing that pride will do is it will cause us to be offended at the other person. We can be offended at the other person and what they did in causing this. Once again, it's understandable, but it causes us to respond in ways that's not helpful. Another thing that can happen because of pride is we can become ashamed of who we are. I think oftentimes what happens is because of pride, one spouse is the person that will be offended at the other person. The other person, in their pride, they respond with shame. Maybe they were the ones who decided to go this way. They were the ones that made the decision that seemed to be damaging the marriage. So that's a very common response, is for this person, when they're ashamed of themselves, they blind themselves from what they are becoming as a person. Shame seems like the right response. But if I sit here and am ashamed of myself because I'm the one who made this decision, my shame will prevent me from living my life. And so although shame feels like a good response, it feels like even a moral response. And the other person we're married to, they might even want us to feel a lot of shame. But we can feel so much shame that we stop living our life. Now let's talk about fear. Fear causes us to have destructive behaviors. Destructive behaviors. These behaviors become the things that destroy our relationship. Frankly, although this event seemed like such a horrific event, it's our response to that horrific event that is far worse. Let's talk about destructive behaviors. I think there's two kinds of destructive behaviors. There are known destructive behaviors, like being the person who said, hey, let's go this way, it looks more adventurous. We can look at that person and say, you were the bad person. You almost destroyed us. But once we go through a situation like this and fear sets in, we can begin to have what I would call unknown destructive behaviors, where I begin to live in such a way that I cause destruction in my relationships. I'll get more into that in just a couple of minutes. So, but there's still a truth that exists. The truth that still exists is we were made for more. And even though our life looks like this mess right now, we were still made for more. And the fact that this event happened doesn't change the reality of what we're made for. Secondly, overcoming the setback is a gift to your future. Human instinct says, because this thing happened, it is taking away from my future. This happens to all people. People that live boldly into the future are people who use this to help them live their best bold life. Your life was not made to be problem-free. It was made for powerful purpose, freedom, and love. It was made to have the presence of great things, not just the absence of problems. Frankly, life will always have problems. People that are most surprised when this thing happened were people that, frankly, before the journey ever began, they had the thinking that nothing will go wrong. And the response that people have to this situation shows the thinking they had before the journey ever began. And the powerful truth that exists that's so important is that this problem doesn't have to prevent us from having what we were made to have, which is a life of powerful purpose, powerful freedom, and powerful love. And you can be the person you were made to be, and then that will change your relationships. Notice, you can be the person you were made to be, and that will change your relationships. You can be the person you were made to be. That will result in different relationships. What people tend to do is get it backwards, and they think, as soon as this relationship changes, I will be the person I was made to be. My friend, it doesn't happen. In spite of what's happened in the relationship, each person needs to become responsible for who they were made to be and be that person, and then that will change the relationship. So, in trying to clean up the mess and get on with your life, let me tell you some wrong answers. Wrong answers is trying to figure out whose fault it was. I would say this. Okay, something bad happened. Get over it. We can spend the rest of our life trying to figure out whose fault it was. Can I tell you something? The instinct to figure this out is pride. Because I am so busy being shocked that something's gone wrong, I need to find someone to pin this on. We got to pin this on somebody. Well, what if these events happen to everyone? And instead of becoming a student of figuring out who should be condemned and judged, what if we know how to live our best bold life in spite of that happening? Another wrong answer is to study the aftermath. When this event happened, there's all kinds of things happening in this realm of life. There's many people involved in this. There were several people that had capsized. There's bystanders on this other bank of the river that are watching and trying to help and doing things. And there is so much happening here. We can become a student of all of that. Thirdly, a wrong answer is to study our shipwrecked behavior. What do I mean by that? When I started the journey in the kayak, I had a certain way of thinking. After this event, and I'm over here holding on to this log and the dead branches, I am thinking very, very differently. The threat is I need to stay here and hold on to this tree and study my behavior that I have now. Because when you think different, you act different. And so I can become a person that studies my shipwrecked behavior. And the problem is not how I'm acting while I'm holding on to this tree. My problem is I've stopped living out my purpose. Lastly, a wrong answer is figure out how to make sure rapids never happen again. This goes back to the unknown destructive behavior. When two people begin a journey together and something bad goes wrong, one person might be the person who seems to have caused it all. The other person might become the judge for the rest of their life. And what they do is they say to themselves, I'm going to make sure that you never do this again. And although that comes from a good place, that comes from a good heart. Who wouldn't look at their spouse and say, I'm going to make sure we don't capsize again? But the problem is, if one spouse looks at the other spouse and they become kind of their parole officer, or the person that is the guarding them from making a wrong decision again, they will cease to share love together. So the unknown destructive behavior can be when one person wants to make sure rapids never happen again. And that comes out of insecurity. It might come from an honest place, but it also comes from an insecure place. Frankly, rapids come for everyone. The only way to avoid the rapids is to get out of the river, but that doesn't work either. So how to get it back? Realize this is normal. This is normal. Every couple faces this kind of scenario. We fill in the blanks differently. Maybe it was a different type of wrong decision made, a different type of incident, but all couples face this thing. It's very normal. All people face what you have faced. It's not strange that this has happened to you. It's not strange at all. You get to choose how you'll respond. That's the good news. It is okay that this has happened. It's okay that you've gotten to this place. It's okay that you feel like you almost drowned. It's okay that the kayak flipped over. It's okay that it was scary. This is what life is sometimes. The good news is we still get to choose how we're going to respond. Lastly, get help. But get help from people that are living the life you want to experience. If you're in a kayak floating down a river on this great journey, I don't recommend you talk to someone who has read a lot about kayaking in the river. Talk to someone who has kayaked in the river successfully. Talk to people that are living the life that you want to experience. The life that you are meant for is a life of purpose, freedom, and love. If you need help with this, I want you to go to our website, markdelaney.com. We're not going to focus on your problems. We're not going to help you unwind your past. We're going to help you know your purpose and get back to being the person that you were made to be. Because when you get back to being the person you were made to be, your relationships will then become what they were made to be. I hope this helps.